Who saw all of this happening with our friend, young brother, young Don?
The fact of the matter is, I still believe that Jesus came from the Father, and not in some metaphorical, weird, and mysterious way. He always existed alongside the Father, while still coming from the Father, being born of the Father. Eternally begotten is how the Catholics would put it.
And when young Don, over the last, couple months, he's just like, brother, we see where this is going. And some people would just say it kind of jokingly, hey, listen, pretty soon you're going to be a Hebrew Israelite. Pretty soon you're going to be this. Pretty soon you're going to be that.
That's the attitude I had, and of course, I adopted several beliefs from, the church I started attending, right?
It's almost though he has a kind of a humble attitude that you would think going into it, which you should have kept. And truth be told, with his trajectory, the way he's bouncing around and going from one place to the next place, he might be back. Who didn't see this coming? Or maybe I should ask, who saw this coming? Who saw all of this happening with our friend, young brother, young Don? You can see what's going to happen in a year, 2 years, 5 years. You just see where it's headed. And when young Don, over the last, couple months, he's just like, brother, we see where this is going. And some people would just say it kind of jokingly, hey, listen, pretty soon you're going to be a Hebrew Israelite. Pretty soon you're going to be this. Pretty soon you're going to be that. Make sure the person that you're listening to knows what they're saying, or at least some sort of way. But when you go from here to here to here to here, up, down, over here, that quickly, this is the very definition of an unstable person. Young man, I hope and pray that in 4 or 5 years, he's back. And truth be told, with his trajectory, the way he's bouncing around and going from one place to the next place, he might be back. He might be back. Now, it calls into question his salvation. It really does. It really does. And guys, you're watching a person, I don't want to say crash and burn, because it's almost, you never know if a person is a believer or not. You treat them like a believer, and at his age, and as long as he hadn't even been saved the whole year. So you just don't know, what's happening with him.
To it. Yeah, man. It's time. It is time. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Guys, it's time I told you.
Oops, sorry.
It's time I told you the truth. Some time ago, about I don't know how long it's been now. You know what? It would have started about a week before my daughter was born. So that now puts it about, let's see here. That now puts it about just, about a month ago. I decided to start studying the Trinity. As a Christian, let me record this. As a Christian, you get what I like to call a Christian dogma starter package, or a Christian doctrine starter package, a set of beliefs that you just inherit. And they're very popular, and they're, you go into almost any church in America, and there are certain things they're just going to tell you is true. And you just accept it. Why? Because the man on the pulpit, he's old. You assume he's read the Bible a bunch, probably even went to some kind of theological school, some kind of seminary, some kind of Bible school. And so he for sure knows what he's talking about. Also, the Bible is a complicated, mystical book that you can't understand, and you need somebody to break it down for you and tell you the truth, right? And so that's the attitude I had. And of course, I adopted several beliefs from, the church I started attending, right?
It's almost though he has a kind of a humble attitude that you would think going into it, which you should have kept.
But I was always open to it. I was open to Jesus, pre-existing the world. And that's where I've leaned to at this point in time. But the fact of the matter is, I still believe that Jesus came from the Father, and not in some metaphorical, weird, and mysterious way, to where he, in some way, always existed alongside the Father, while still coming from the Father, being born of the Father. Eternally begotten is how the Catholics would put it. I was like, yeah, this is just not adding up for me. It's just not making sense. Calls him his father. To be someone's father, it means you must exist before your son. It's that simple.
The issue is the fact that Jesus came from the Father. And you could, as you read the scriptures, okay, he came from the Father. All right. So the question is, and I'm gonna come to it in detail in just a little bit, but about Jesus, is he of the Father, from the Father? This term that we hear, Son of God. What does that mean? Because the big issue, isn't it amazing how a small word can create a big problem? This word of, O-F, OF, almost said OV, OF, creates a huge problem for some people. So we're going to look at that.
Articulates my position by a brother who is a prophetic verse used to talk about Jesus. And it says, you love righteousness and hate wickedness. Therefore, God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of joy more than your companions.
Now, his point here on this particular issue, and we'll cover it right now, is the fact that in, where is it at? Psalm 40, there, 45:7, where it seems to be pointing to someone else who is, I guess, God. So let's go there. He says, you have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. Therefore, God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of joy above your fellows. Now, there's a couple ways you can take this. There's a couple ways you can take this. Is he speaking about Jesus, or is he possibly speaking about the person who's referring to? Well, in this case, the word Elohim doesn't, and we've covered this, by the way, good plug for the class. Elohim does not always mean God. Context tells us who he's speaking of, but we're going to find out that Jesus being called God is not a New Testament concept. It's in the Old Testament as well. By the way, Rocky Mountain Highway, that's a very good passage. We're going to cover that as well. And so this in no way does not disprove, but his point is that, yeah, Elohim can also mean something other than the God. But don't take that to mean that it never means God, because most cases, 99%, I shouldn't say 99%, but about 97, 90% of the time that Elohim is used, it's used to refer to the God, our Father God, the God in heaven, the God. That's what is most often used. There are times where we see it being used to talk about judges or rulers or those with authority. That happens, and so that's likely the case here in Psalm 45:7. As a matter of fact, another passage that we look at sometimes is Psalm 82:1-6. Look what he says. God takes his stand in his own congregation. Now, this word for God, though, is actually the God. So we're speaking about the actual God. But then he says in his own congregation, he judges in the midst of the rulers. Now, here's the other term for Elohim, for these rulers, for these Elohims, judges, these rulers, those in authority. Okay? So he's saying this God takes his stand in the midst of his own congregation. He judged in the midst of the other so-called authorities. And he is going to demonstrate who actually is God. Look what he says. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Speaking of these unjust judges, these rulers who aren't doing their job, he says, vindicate the weak or judge the weak and the fatherless. Do justice to the afflicted and destitute. Rescue the weak and needy. Deliver them out of the hand of the wicked. And there's a reason why this is being stated. Verse 5, or 82:5. They do not know, nor do they understand. They walk about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth are shaking. Look what he says. I said you are gods, and all of you are sons of the Most High. What's his point? His point is, and of course, Jesus brings this up as well, you guys have this authority, and you are not using it correctly. Oh, by the way, just a little plug. On next week, we're going to be talking about this whole issue of Christian nationalism and theonomy and so forth in terms of the way the guys want to do it. You do realize that God doesn't trust mankind to be rulers. You do realize that God does not, nor will he ever trust us to lead, to be over governments. That has never worked, nor will it ever work. But he shows us here in this example